There is a phrase that echoes quietly through this whole long story, whispered from one age to the next across nearly 1,000 years, spoken by hooded figures on rooftops in the moonlight, and it goes like this: nothing is true, everything is permitted. It is a strange and beautiful and slightly frightening idea, and tonight, slowly and softly and in no hurry at all, we are going to wander through the whole vast world that grew up around it, the world of the assassins and their endless secret war, a world that stretches from ancient Egypt to Renaissance Italy to the golden age of pirates and far beyond. And we are going to do it gently, drifting from one quiet fact to the next, because although it is a story full of blades and towers and hidden things, it is also, in the end, only a story, only light and imagination and make-believe, and there is nothing in any of it that can follow you here into the warm and ordinary quiet of your own room. So settle in now and make yourself comfortable and pull the blankets up, and if this kind of slow, calm wander through a great sprawling world is the sort of thing that helps you fall asleep, you might leave a gentle like before you drift away, and perhaps tell me down in the comments where in the world you are listening from tonight, and then just let all of it go, and let me tell you, softly and slowly, more than 100 quiet facts about the creed of the assassins. Let us begin, as these stories so often do, at the beginning, with a fact that surprises many people, which is that this whole enormous world was never meant to exist at all, that it began its life as something else entirely, a side story to another, older game. For the very first assassin was originally imagined not as the hero of his own tale, but as a bodyguard, a silent protector meant to guard a prince in a game about that prince, a spin-off of a long-running series about a wandering royal in ancient Persia. The idea was that you would play as the assassin sworn to keep the prince safe, and the whole thing would orbit around the prince as its center. But as the small team at a studio in Montreal worked on it, they came to feel that the assassin was far more interesting than the prince he was meant to serve, and in a bold and fateful decision, they cut the prince away entirely and let the assassin step into the light as the hero of his own story. And so an entire new world was born out of the shadow of an older one. The people who made it drew on a deep well of real history and real legend, and one of the most important of these was a novel, an old book written long before any of this, by a writer from a small European country, published in the years before the Second Great War of the last century. That novel told the story of an ancient order of assassins in a mountain fortress in Persia, led by a mysterious and brilliant master, and it was from this book, more than from any single source, that the whole spirit of the thing was drawn, its atmosphere of secret orders and hidden truths and terrible freedom. And it was from that book, too, that the famous phrase came, the one we began with, the maxim that nothing is true and everything is permitted, which the novel gave as the secret creed at the heart of the order, the dark and dizzying wisdom that the master shared only with his most trusted followers. Behind the novel lay something older still, a piece of genuine history, for there really was, long ago, an order of assassins in the mountains of Persia and Syria, a real secret sect that flourished nearly 1,000 years ago, led by a real and shadowy figure whom legend remembers as the Old Man of the Mountain. They held a string of mountain fortresses, chief among them a great castle called Animus, and from these strongholds they were said to strike down their enemies with sudden, precise and fearless killings, appearing where no one expected them and vanishing again into the crowd. They were a small group, never a great army, and they survived among far more powerful enemies precisely through this reputation for reaching anyone, anywhere, no matter how well guarded. so that even the mightiest sultan might fear to sleep. The very name we use for them carries a mystery inside it, one that historians still gently argue about, for the word assassin itself is often said to come from a word meaning users of a certain intoxicating herb, hashish, the story being that the Order's followers were given the drug to glimpse a promised paradise and then sent out to kill in the hope of returning to it. This tale was spread far and wide by travelers from the West long ago, most famously by a certain Venetian merchant who wrote of his journeys east, and it became the popular explanation for the Order's fearlessness. But many modern scholars regard this story with deep suspicion, treating it as a piece of legend and propaganda spread by the Order's enemies rather than sober fact, a colourful slander that stuck, and so even the origin of the word assassin is not quite the settled thing it seems, but a knot of history and rumour that has never been fully untangled. The people who built this world took all of these threads, the cancelled prince and the old novel and the real mountain assassins and the half-legendary old man, and wove them together into something new, a fictional brotherhood that they imagined stretching not merely across a few centuries of Persian history, but across the whole of human time, from the deepest antiquity to the present day and beyond. They gave this brotherhood a great enemy, a rival order dedicated to the opposite ideals, and they set the two of them at war across all of history, hiding their endless struggle behind the events of the real past, so that every war and every assassination and every turning point you ever read about might secretly have been a move in their long, quiet game. And it is into that game, that vast and secret history behind history, that we are going to wander tonight. To understand how the story lets us wander through so many different centuries, we have to meet the strange machine at the very heart of it, a device called the Animus, and the peculiar idea it is built upon, for the whole framework rests on a piece of imagined science, the notion that memory is not only stored in our minds but also, somehow, written into our very blood, passed down from parent to child across the generations, so that locked inside each of us lies a hidden record of the lives our ancestors lived. The Animus is the machine that can read this record, that can reach back through a person's own genetic inheritance and let them relive, in perfect detail, the memories of someone who died centuries before they were born, walking their streets, feeling their fears, reliving their days. It is a lovely and slightly eerie idea, this notion of ancestral memory sleeping in the blood, and it is what allows the story to slip so gracefully between the distant past and the present. For whenever we walk through some ancient city, we are really a modern person, lying still in a machine, dreaming another person's life through the strange gift of inherited memory. And it gives the story one of its cleverest touches, a quiet explanation for why the hero can never truly die in these ancient adventures, because you cannot change what already happened, and so a fatal misstep does not kill the character, but simply breaks the connection to the memory, throwing the dreamer out of the past for a moment before they slip back in and try again, the whole thing framed as a memory losing its thread rather than a death. The machine, and the terrible idea behind it, belongs at first to the enemy, a vast and powerful corporation that presents itself to the world as an ordinary maker of medicines and technology, but is in truth the modern face of the ancient rival order, the great secret enemy of the assassins, hiding in plain sight behind a respectable name. This corporation seeks out the descendants of assassins and uses the machine to sift through their inherited memories, hunting for the hiding places of ancient and powerful artifacts that their ancestors once touched, so that the past becomes a treasure map and the living descendants become unwilling keys to unlock it. And so we come to the modern man at the center of the early chapters of the whole saga, an ordinary young bartender who is kidnapped from his quiet life and strapped into the machine, forced to relive the memories of his distant ancestors while the corporation mines his blood for its secrets. He is a reluctant hero, an everyman who wants nothing to do with any of this, a descendant of a great line of assassins who had tried to run away from his heritage, and who now finds himself the unwilling window through which we glimpse the lives of the great hooded figures of the past. Through his eyes, or rather through the memories dredged up out of his blood, we come to know the assassins of ages long gone. There is a genuinely unsettling danger woven into this machine, a phenomenon the story calls the bleeding effect, and it is one of the more haunting ideas in the whole world. For if a person spends too long inside the Animus, reliving too many memories too deeply, the boundary between their own mind and the minds of their ancestors begins to break down, and the ancient memories start to bleed through into waking life, so that the dreamer begins to see the ghosts of the past overlaid upon the present, and to feel skills and instincts that are not their own rising up inside them. It is both a gift and a curse, for it can turn an ordinary person into a capable fighter by giving them their ancestors' hard-won abilities, but it can also unravel the mind, blurring who they are until they are no longer sure which memories belong to them and which belong to the dead. There was one soul before our reluctant bartender who suffered this fate most terribly, an earlier prisoner of the corporation, a young man driven slowly to madness and despair by the bleeding effect, his mind so overwhelmed by the flood of other lives that he could no longer hold himself together. Before the end, in his growing madness, he covered the walls of his cell in strange symbols and hidden messages and elaborate puzzles, a desperate code left behind for whoever might come after him, and these hidden glyphs, scattered secretly through the memories for a careful eye to find, became one of the great quiet mysteries of the early story, a dead man's warning left painted in the dark for the next prisoner to discover. At the heart of the whole saga stand two great orders locked in an endless struggle, and it is worth understanding gently what each of them believes, because their war is really a war of ideas, one of the oldest arguments there is. On one side stand the assassins, the hooded brotherhood, and what they fight for, above everything, is free will, the belief that human beings must be left free to choose their own paths, to make their own mistakes, to find their own way, even when that freedom is messy and dangerous and painful. On the other side stand their ancient enemies, an order devoted to order itself, to peace through control, believing that people left free will only hurt themselves and one another, and that the world can only be made safe if it is quietly guided and governed from the shadows by those wise enough to know best. The beautiful and troubling thing about this long conflict is that neither side is simply evil, for both of them want, in their own way, a better world, and both of them are willing to do terrible things to reach it. The Brotherhood believes in freedom, but kills to protect it. Their enemies believe in peace, but would take away the very liberty that makes people human to achieve it. And the story returns again and again to this ache at its center, the sense that the assassins and their enemies are two halves of a single unanswerable question about how the world should be, whether people are better left free or better kept safe, a question the story is far too wise to ever fully answer, letting the war go on and on precisely because neither side is entirely right. The Brotherhood lives by a creed, a set of 3 simple rules that bind them together across all the centuries, and the assassins recite them like a quiet prayer. The first is to stay the blade from the flesh of the innocent, to kill only those who would bring harm to others, never the blameless. The second is to hide in plain sight, to move through the world unseen, not by vanishing, but by becoming one of the crowd, an ordinary face among ordinary faces. And the third is never to compromise the brotherhood, never to let one's actions, however justified they seem, bring danger down upon the others. These three tenets are the spine of the whole order, the discipline that is meant to keep a band of killers from becoming mere murderers. And above the three tenets floats that strange maxim we began with, the deepest and most dizzying part of the creed, the idea that nothing is true and everything is permitted. It sounds at first like a license for chaos, a declaration that nothing matters and anything is allowed, and the story is careful to show that it can be misread that way, and that some have. But the assassins understand it more subtly, as a hard and humbling wisdom, a reminder that the comfortable certainties people cling to, the rules and the authorities and the absolute truths, are all human inventions, that nothing is written into the fabric of the world, and that because of this we are terribly, wonderfully free, and wholly responsible for what we choose to do with that freedom. It is not a permission to do anything, but a burden of complete responsibility, and understood that way, it is one of the more profound ideas the whole world offers. The great symbol of the brotherhood, and the tool most associated with them, is the hidden blade, a slender dagger worn along the underside of the forearm that springs out from beneath the sleeve at a flick of the wrist, letting the assassin strike suddenly and then conceal the weapon again in an instant. It is the perfect expression of everything they are, a blade made for the quiet, precise, close killing of a single target, hidden until the very last moment, drawn from a hand that seemed empty. And it carries with it, in the oldest lore of the Order, a chilling mark of devotion. For in the earliest days the blade was mounted in such a way that the wielder had to sacrifice a finger to use it, cutting away the ring finger of the hand so that the blade could extend cleanly, a permanent brand of belonging that every true assassin bore. The very first hero of the saga wears this mark, his hand already missing its finger when we meet him, though as the centuries pass and the Order refines its craft, the blade is redesigned so that the sacrifice is no longer needed, and later assassins keep all their fingers while still wielding the weapon. It is a small piece of world building, this evolution of the blade from a tool that demanded a piece of your own flesh into a cleaner mechanism, but it is the kind of detail that makes the Order feel real and old, an ancient tradition slowly modernizing across the generations, its brutal early customs softening into something more practical while never quite losing their weight. Over the long history of the Brotherhood, the hidden blade grew and changed in 100 small ways, gaining companions and variations, a second blade for the other arm, a mechanism for firing poisoned darts, a small hidden gun, a device for firing a rope to swing and climb, each new age adding its own refinements to the old design. And there is something quietly moving in following this single object across the centuries, watching it passed down and improved and reinvented from one assassin to the next, a thread of continuity running through all the different heroes and all the different ages, the same essential weapon in 1,000 different hands, each of them a link in a chain, reaching back to the very beginning. Beneath the war of the two orders lies a far stranger and older secret, the deepest layer of the whole mythology, and it reaches back not centuries but tens of thousands of years, to a time before human history began. For the story imagines that long ago, before our kind rose to power, The Earth was ruled by another people entirely, an advanced and powerful civilization that came before us, often called simply those who came before, or the ones who were first, beings who were not quite human, taller and stranger, and possessed of knowledge and power far beyond anything we have since achieved. They built wonders and wielded forces we can scarcely imagine, and they are the true origin of nearly every mystery in the whole saga. And here is the unsettling heart of it, for according to this hidden history, humanity did not arise on its own at all, but was made, created by this first people to serve them, a species engineered to be their workers and their servants. To keep their creations obedient, the first civilization built devices of extraordinary power, artifacts that could bend the human mind, compel obedience, inspire love or terror, or worship with a touch. And these artifacts are scattered like seeds throughout the whole story, the true prizes over which the assassins and their enemies fight across all the centuries. They are called the Pieces of Eden, and they are the closest thing the world has to magic, ancient technology so far beyond us that it might as well be divine. The most famous of these artifacts is a golden sphere, often called an apple, a piece of Eden that can project illusions, control minds, bend the wills of whole crowds, and reveal hidden knowledge. And it is this object, in its various forms, that drives so much of the conflict, for whoever holds it holds a power that could reshape the world. There are others too, staffs and swords and shrouds and other shapes, each with its own strange abilities, and the story delights in suggesting that many of the legendary objects of real myth and history, the fabled swords and holy relics and magical talismans of a dozen cultures, were in truth these ancient devices, their true nature forgotten, remembered only as miracles. The story of the first civilization is a tragedy, for they did not last, and the manner of their fall is one of the grand, quiet mysteries at the base of everything. Long ago, the story tells us, a great catastrophe struck the earth, an immense burst of fire from the sun that swept across the world and devastated both the first people and their human servants alike, breaking the power of the old civilization forever and leaving only scattered survivors among the ruins. In the desperate years before that disaster, some of the first people had labored frantically to find a way to save the world, working in great hidden vaults, and when they failed to prevent the catastrophe, a few of them left messages behind, recordings preserved across the ages, meant to warn whoever might come after that the danger could return. A handful of these ancient beings became almost like gods in the memory that followed, their names surviving in the myths of later ages, remembered as deities by the humans who came after and could not understand what they had truly been. The story imagines that the gods of the old religions, the great figures of ancient myth, were really members of this first civilization, dimly remembered, their real history lost, their science mistaken for divinity, and a few of them left behind these preserved messages, appearing to the heroes of the story across the centuries as ghostly recordings, speaking out of the deep past to warn of the disaster to come and to plead with the living to prevent it from happening again. Not all of these ancient survivors wished humanity well, and here the mythology takes its darkest turn, for one among them is remembered as harboring a deep hatred for the human species that had risen to inherit the world, and she worked, across the ages, through her preserved messages and hidden schemes, to find a way to return and to bring humanity back under the old yoke of control. The tension between the ancient ones who wanted to warn and protect the living and the ones who wished to enslave or destroy them runs beneath the whole modern-day story. a conflict older than history itself, still playing out through the artifacts and the messages left scattered across the world. There is even, in the deepest lore, a story of the very first rebellion, of two humans among the enslaved species who were born different, born with a fragment of the first people's own power in their blood, and who stole one of the precious artifacts and used it to lead an uprising against their masters. These two, remembered in the oldest myths under names that echo down into the story of the garden and the first man and woman, are imagined as the true origin of the long struggle for human freedom, the first to say that people should not be slaves, and their distant descendants, carrying that same rebellious blood, would one day become the assassins. And so the Brotherhood's whole fight for free will is imagined as reaching back, unbroken, to the very first moment a created thing turned to its creator and refused to obey. The first of the great hooded heroes whose life we relive is a young assassin of the Holy Land, living more than 800 years ago in the time of the Great Crusades, when armies of the East and the West clashed over the ancient cities of the region. His name means, quite beautifully, something like the bird or the flyer, paired with a second name that means the son of no one, so that his very name marks him as a creature of the air and of no fixed origin, a fitting name for an assassin. He begins his story as the finest and most gifted of his brotherhood, but also the proudest, arrogant, and reckless, so sure of his own skill that in the very opening of his tale he breaks all three of the sacred tenets at once, killing carelessly, revealing himself, and bringing disaster down upon his brothers. For this terrible failure he is stripped of his rank and very nearly of his life, and the whole of his story becomes a long and humbling journey to earn back his honor, and more importantly, to earn back his understanding of what the creed truly means. His master sends him out to kill a series of powerful men scattered across the great cities of the region, each of them, he is told, a corrupt and cruel figure whose death will make the world better. And as the young assassin hunts them down one by one, he begins to notice something strange, that his victims do not see themselves as villains at all, that each of them speaks, in his dying moments, of a shared cause, a grand design to bring peace and order to a broken world. Slowly the young assassin realizes that his targets were not random criminals, but members of a single hidden order, the Great Enemy, all working toward one secret goal, and that the truth of what he has been doing is far more tangled than he was told. And at the end comes the great and bitter revelation, the discovery that his own master, the venerable old man he had served and trusted his whole life, was himself secretly a member of that enemy order, that he had been using the young assassin as a weapon to eliminate his rivals and gather a great artifact of power for himself. The master had come into possession of one of the ancient golden apples, and its power had corrupted him, convincing him that he could use it to force peace upon the world by controlling the minds of all people. The young assassin confronts and kills his fallen master, taking the ancient artifact for himself, and in touching it he receives a vision, a glimpse of a wider and stranger truth, a map of the world dotted with the hiding places of other such artifacts, and a sense of the vast and ancient mystery lying beneath the war he thought he understood. He emerges from his ordeal utterly changed, no longer the arrogant boy, but a thoughtful and humbled man, and he goes on to become the great leader of his brotherhood, and one of the most important figures in its entire history, reshaping the order for the centuries to come. In the long years that followed, this first hero became a kind of quiet genius of the Brotherhood, and much of what later assassins took for granted flowed from his mind. He it was who redesigned the hidden blade so that it no longer demanded the sacrifice of a finger, who added new mechanisms and refinements to it, who studied the ancient artifact he had won and recorded everything he learned from it in a great secret book, a codex, filling its pages with his discoveries and his philosophy and the designs for his inventions. That book would be scattered and hidden across the world, its pages sought out and gathered by assassins centuries later, a message from the first great mentor to the Brotherhood of the future. His was a long life and, in the end, a sorrowful one, for he lived to a very great age, well past 90, and outlived nearly everyone he loved, his wife and his sons taken from him by the years and by the endless struggle, so that the great mentor spent his final days largely alone, an old man carrying the weight of a long and difficult life. And at the very end, according to the story, he sealed himself away in a hidden library beneath his mountain fortress, taking the ancient golden artifact with him so that its dangerous power might never fall into the wrong hands, closing the door behind him and passing quietly out of the world, leaving his remains and his final secrets waiting in the dark for the one who would come, centuries later, to find them. If the first hero is the most revered of the assassins, the second is by far the most beloved, a young nobleman of Renaissance Italy whose story is told not in one adventure, but across three, following him from a carefree youth all the way into a contemplative old age, a span of decades that lets us know him more deeply than almost any other figure in the whole saga. We meet him as a charming, hot-blooded young man of a wealthy Florentine family, with no thought of assassins or ancient orders, caring only for his family, his friends, and the pretty girls of the city, until his whole world is torn apart in a single terrible day. For his father and his two brothers, he discovers, were secretly assassins, or at least allies of the Brotherhood, and they are betrayed and arrested and publicly hanged as part of a great conspiracy, leaving the young man suddenly the head of a shattered family, fleeing the city with his mother and sister, carrying his father's hidden blade and his father's secret legacy. And so his long path begins, a journey of vengeance that slowly, across the years, deepens into something far greater than vengeance, as the grieving young man is drawn into the Brotherhood, trained in its ways, and gradually transformed from a boy seeking to avenge his family into one of the greatest assassins who ever lived. His story sprawls across the whole of Renaissance Italy and beyond, through the canals and palaces of a dozen city-states, into the corrupt heart of the church itself, and at last far across the sea to the great city that straddles the divide between East and West. His enemies are among the most powerful figures of the age, a ruthless and ambitious family whose head schemes his way to the highest seat in the church, and their conflict plays out against the dazzling backdrop of one of the most creative periods in all of human history, so that the young assassin walks among the artists and thinkers and tyrants of the Renaissance as an equal. One of the great pleasures of his story is the friendship at its center, for among his closest allies is one of the most famous minds who ever lived, a brilliant painter and inventor and dreamer, who becomes the assassin's friend and his maker of marvels, studying the ancient artifacts and the old codex pages, and building from them wondrous devices, repairing the hidden blade, designing new weapons and tools, even, in one unforgettable sequence, constructing a flying machine. The bond between the young assassin and the great inventor is one of the warmest things in the whole saga, a genuine friendship between two extraordinary people, and it lets the story imagine that some of history's greatest inventions were quietly born of this secret partnership. Across his 3 adventures, the beloved assassin grows old before our eyes, and this is the rare and precious thing about his story, that we do not merely glimpse him, but truly live a whole life alongside him, from reckless youth through determined middle age into wise and weary old age, watching him win and lose and love and grieve, and slowly come to understand the deeper meaning of the creed he serves. In his final adventure, an older man now, the leader of his brotherhood, he travels east to the very mountain fortress where the first great mentor lived and died, searching for that hero's lost library, walking in the footsteps of the assassin who came 300 years before him, so that the 2 greatest heroes of the Order are joined across the centuries. And when at last he reaches that ancient hidden library, he finds no treasure and no weapon there, only the seated remains of the first great mentor and the golden artifact he had sealed away. And in that quiet moment, the older assassin speaks some of the most moving words in the whole story, reflecting that he has lived his whole life in service of a creed he only partly understood, addressing the long-dead hero as a fellow traveler across the same lonely road. It is a gentle, elegiac ending for the most beloved of all the assassins, an old man at the end of a long journey, finding not answers, but a kind of peace, and a sense of belonging to something far larger than himself, a brotherhood stretching back and forward across all the ages. His life did not quite end there, for the story followed him a little further still, into his true old age, when he had set down the blade at last and retired to a quiet farm in the countryside with a wife and children, an ordinary life earned after a lifetime of struggle, and it is there, in his final years, that we last see him, an old man at rest, his war finally behind him. There is something deeply comforting in that image, the greatest of the assassins allowed, at the very end, simply to be a husband and a father and to sit in the sun, and it stands as one of the story's quiet promises, that even a life given wholly to a hard and secret cause might find, at last, a little peace. Some of the most beloved chapters of the whole saga follow not a single hero, but a single family. 3 generations of one bloodline carried across most of a century, and the beautiful, tragic thing about them is that they do not all stand on the same side. The story of this family begins on the open sea, in the golden age of piracy, with a young man from a poor farming family who runs away to seek his fortune on the water and falls in with the pirates of the Caribbean, a charming, reckless, gold-hungry rogue who cares at first for nothing but treasure and adventure and has no interest whatever in ancient orders or grand causes. Through sheer accident and greed, this young pirate stumbles into the secret war, killing an assassin and stealing his hooded coat and his identity, using it to chase rumors of a great treasure, and only slowly, reluctantly, coming to understand that the war he has blundered into is real, and that the stakes are far higher than gold. His adventures carry him alongside the most famous pirates of the age, the great bearded terror of the seas among them, through the founding of a lawless pirate haven and its eventual fall, and across it all he is changed, the selfish rogue slowly and painfully growing into a man who understands, too late for some of those he loved, that there are things worth fighting for beyond himself. In the end he takes up the creed in earnest, and returns home to a quieter life. That pirate had a son, and here the family story takes its most striking turn, for the boy grew up to join not the brotherhood of his father but the enemy, becoming a leader of the rival order, a refined and formidable man, elegant and intelligent, and utterly convinced that the world could only be saved through order and control. His story is famous for the way it is told, for when we first begin to relive his memories, we are led to believe he is an assassin like all the others, watching him fight and scheme and seem to work toward noble ends, until the quiet, devastating moment when we realize we have been walking in the shoes of the enemy all along, that this charming man we have come to like is a leader of the very order the heroes oppose. And that man, in turn, fathered a son of his own with a woman of one of the native nations of the New World, a boy raised in a village in the forests of a young and troubled country on the edge of revolution. That boy, after his village is burned and his mother killed, grows up to become an assassin, and so the family completes its strange circle, the grandson standing on the opposite side from his father, the assassin son of a Templar father, the two of them bound by blood and divided by everything they believe. Their relationship is one of the most painful in the whole saga, for they are not simply enemies but father and son, each unable to abandon his cause and each unable to abandon the other, meeting again and again across the years in a slow tragedy of a family torn in two by the oldest argument in the world. The young native assassin's story unfolds against the birth of a nation, amid a great revolution, and he walks among the founders and generals of that struggle, lending his hidden blade to their cause, while slowly learning the bitter lesson that the freedom being won so grandly on the battlefield would not be extended to his own people, that the new nation being born in the name of liberty would go on to take everything from the very nations that had lived on that land for countless generations. It gives his story a deep and honest melancholy, a hero who fights for a revolution's ideals, while seeing clearly the ways those ideals fall short, and it is one of the more thoughtful and sorrowful of all the tales the saga tells. There is a lovely and meta twist to how this pirate grandfather's story reaches us too, for in reliving his memories, we are cast not as one of the usual heroes, but as an ordinary modern office worker, a new employee at the entertainment division of the great enemy corporation, sitting at a desk and reliving the pirate's life as though it were simply a product being mined for a gain. It is a playful and clever piece of storytelling, folding the machine and the corporation and the whole framework into an office comedy of sorts, letting the story wink at its own nature, while the deeper conspiracy hums along quietly beneath the fluorescent lights. And it remains one of the most inventive of all the ways the saga has framed its journeys into the past. For many years the story reached only as far back as the Crusades, but eventually it turned around and journeyed into the deep past to tell the tale of how the Brotherhood itself began, and this brought us to the last days of ancient Egypt, more than 2,000 years ago, in the time of the famous queen, who was the last of the pharaohs and the Roman general who loved her. Here we follow a protector of the common people, one of a dwindling order of sacred guardians in a land falling under foreign control, a good and grieving man drawn into a hunt for the masked conspirators responsible for a terrible personal loss. As he tracks them down one by one, he discovers that they are not scattered criminals, but a single hidden order pursuing the same dream of control that the enemy would pursue forever after. Out of that man's long struggle, and out of the parallel struggle of his equally formidable wife, the very first Brotherhood is born, an order they call the Hidden Ones, dedicated to working in secret against the powerful to protect the freedom of the many. It is genuinely moving to watch the familiar traditions take their first shape here at the beginning. The creed being spoken for the first time, the hidden blade being adopted, the whole philosophy of the order emerging out of one couple's grief and resolve, so that every assassin who came after, across all the thousands of years, traces back to these two and the order they founded in the ruins of the old world. The wife, in particular, carries the order onward into the very heart of the Roman world, planting the seeds from which the whole future brotherhood would grow. The story reached back even further than this, into ancient Greece, to a time before the brotherhood existed at all, before there were assassins or their enemies in any recognizable form, only the deep and distant roots from which they would one day spring. Here we follow a wandering mercenary, a descendant of a legendary warrior king, caught up in a great war between two mighty cities and hunting a shadowy society that pulls the strings behind the whole conflict, a proto-order that foreshadows the enemy of later ages. This hero carries a broken spear that is secretly one of the ancient artifacts, a piece of Eden that grants extraordinary abilities, and through it is drawn into the deepest mysteries of the first civilization. That ancient Greek hero holds a strange and special place in the whole saga, for through the power of the artifact and the strange blood in their veins, this mercenary does not die when their age ends but lives on, unnaturally long, across thousands of years, surviving into the modern day itself, a single person who walks out of the ancient world and into the present, carrying the memory of the whole span of history in one mind. It is one of the more remarkable ideas the story has ever reached for, a bridge of a single living person stretched across the entire timeline, and it ties the most ancient chapter directly to the newest. The journey into the past continued into the age of the Northern Raiders, the seafaring warriors of the far north who crossed the cold seas to raid and settle new lands more than 1,000 years ago. And here, the story followed a mighty warrior of that people, caught up in the settling of a green and troubled island kingdom, and in the ongoing shadow war between the Hidden Ones and their enemies, now operating in that distant northern world. But this chapter reached into something stranger and more mythic than any before it, weaving in the old gods of the northern myths and suggesting, in its deepest and most debated turns, that this warrior carried within them the very memories and soul of one of the ancient first civilization beings, one remembered by later ages as the chief of the northern gods, so that the line between the warrior and the ancient one grew hauntingly thin. That same northern chapter introduced a quiet, watchful figure who would go on to have a story of his own, a member of the Hidden Ones from the great city of learning far to the east, and the story later followed him back to that shining city in its golden age, among its libraries and markets and palaces, in a tale of a young thief taken in and trained by the Order in the manner of the very oldest adventures, a deliberate return to the roots of the whole saga. And this figure too was revealed to carry a strange and ancient secret, to be, in the deepest lore, another of the first civilization's souls reborn, a trickster remembered in the northern myths, patient and clever and playing a very long game across the centuries, so that even in the newest chapters the oldest mysteries kept quietly turning. And the story has continued to travel, reaching in time to the distant islands of the east, to feudal Japan in an age of war, following two very different figures bound to the shadow war in that faraway land, one a nimble shadow warrior of the native tradition, and the other a towering foreign-born swordsman, based in part on a real and remarkable historical figure who genuinely lived and served in that time and place. And so the saga keeps widening, reaching into more and more corners of the human past, each new age adding another thread to the enormous tapestry, another hero, another city, another turn of the endless struggle between the desire for freedom and the desire for control. Between these great chapters, the saga told many other stories, each set in its own turbulent corner of history, and one of the most atmospheric of them carried us into the French Revolution, into the crowded, seething streets of a great city, in the grip of upheaval, all falling monarchy and rising terror and mobs in the squares. Here we followed a young assassin caught in a doomed and tender love story, for he loved a young woman raised within the enemy order, the two of them bound together across the great divide, much as star-crossed lovers have always been, an assassin and a Templar who cared for each other more than for the war that should have made them enemies. Their tragic romance gave that chapter a mournful, romantic heart amid all the fire and the guillotines. That chapter was famous above all for the extraordinary care with which it recreated the great city and its landmarks, and one building in particular, the vast and beloved cathedral at the city's heart, was rebuilt within the story in astonishing detail, every statue and window and soaring arch modelled with painstaking love by artists who spent years studying it. And there is a poignant real-world footnote to this, for when that very cathedral was later ravaged by a terrible fire, many people thought of the meticulous digital recreation that the story had made, and wondered whether all that careful work might help in some small way with the long task of restoration, so that a labour of love made for a game about the past became, in a strange way, a small part of preserving the real thing. Another chapter took us to the great foggy capital of the industrial age, to a sprawling city of factories and slums and gaslit streets, where we followed not one hero but two, a pair of twins, a brother and a sister, who came to the city to wrest it from the grip of the enemy order that controlled its industry and its underworld. The brother was brash and impulsive, fond of a good fight and of gathering a street gang to challenge the enemy's power directly, while the sister was patient and precise and far more interested in the quiet, careful pursuit of the ancient artifacts. And the contrast between the two and their affectionate sibling bickering gave that chapter a lightness and a warmth. Two very different assassins working the same city from two different directions. Perhaps the most fascinating of these in-between stories, though, was one that dared to tell the tale from the other side, following a young assassin who comes, through a terrible experience, to believe that his own brotherhood is dangerously wrong. Sent to recover an ancient artifact, he witnesses a catastrophe, a great and deadly disaster that he becomes convinced was caused by the assassins' reckless meddling with powers they did not understand, and this shatters his faith in everything he believed. In his grief and horror, he turns against his former brothers and joins the enemy order, coming to believe that their caution and their desire for control might be the wiser path after all, and he spends the rest of his story hunting down the very assassins he once called family. It is a genuinely unsettling and thought-provoking chapter, this story of a man who changes sides, because it forces us to see the whole long war from the perspective we are least used to feel the pull of the enemy's argument, to understand how a good and thoughtful person might look at the assassin's passionate defense of freedom and see instead a dangerous recklessness that gets innocent people killed. It embodies, more directly than almost any other part of the saga, that deep refusal to make either side simply right or simply wrong, letting us walk for a while in the shoes of the enemy and find, uncomfortably, that we understand them. Taken all together, these many heroes across these many ages form a kind of great chain stretching across the whole of human history, each one a link, each one fighting the same endless struggle in their own time and their own way, from the deserts of the ancient world to the foggy cities of the industrial age. And there is something quietly beautiful in the scale of it, in the way the saga uses its strange premise of inherited memory to carry us across thousands of years and dozens of lives, showing us the same eternal argument playing out again and again in every age, the same hood and the same blade passed from hand to hand down the long centuries, an unbroken thread of people who believed that human beings should be free. Running quietly beneath all these journeys into the past is the thread of the present day, the story of the people using the machine, and for the first long stretch of the saga, that story belonged to the reluctant bartender we met at the beginning. Across several chapters, his tale unfolded in the shadows of the historical adventures, his kidnapping and his escape, his gathering of a small band of modern assassins, his own gradual awakening as the bleeding effect gave him the skills of his ancestors and drew him deeper into a destiny he had never wanted. And all the while, the messages left by the ancient beings grew more urgent, warning that the great catastrophe that had destroyed the first civilization, the burst of fire from the sun, was coming again, and that the world had very little time. His story built toward a genuine and moving climax. For the whole purpose of reliving his ancestors' memories, it turned out, was to find the knowledge hidden in the deep past that might save the world from the returning disaster. And at the very end, he was faced with a terrible choice, a choice between his own life and the lives of everyone on Earth, and he chose, as the heroes of these stories tend to sacrifice himself, giving his life to activate an ancient device that would shield the world from the coming fire. It was a quietly devastating ending for the everyman who had never asked for any of it, the ordinary young man who ran from his heritage only to save the entire world with his death. But his sacrifice carried a sting in its tail, a genuinely unsettling twist, for to save the world he had to trust the guidance of one of the ancient beings, and the one who guided him to that choice was the very one who harbored the old hatred for humanity, so that in saving everyone from the fire, he also, unknowingly, set free that ancient and malevolent will, releasing her to pursue her long-held dream of bringing humanity back under control. It is a beautifully bitter irony that the hero's noble sacrifice, the act that saved the world, was also the act that loosed a new and ancient danger upon it, and it kept the deep story turning even after its first great hero was gone. After him, the modern thread passed to others, to new characters exploring the past for their own reasons, and one figure in particular came to carry the present-day story forward for a long stretch, a brilliant former employee of the enemy corporation who broke away and pursued the ancient mysteries down her own increasingly obsessive path. Through her, the story continued to widen and deepen, but there is a way in which the modern-day thread grew quieter and more mysterious over time, receding into the background as the historical adventures grew ever larger and more central, so that the grand overarching story of the ancient beings and the coming and going of catastrophes became a slow, patient mystery unfolding across many years, always present but rarely resolved. And this points to one of the genuine and much discussed puzzles of the whole saga, the sense that its enormous overarching story, the tale of the first civilization and the artifacts and the endless approaching dangers, has grown so vast and so tangled across so many chapters that it may never be fully resolved, that it has become less a plot heading toward an ending than a kind of endless mythology, always deepening, always adding new layers, never quite arriving. Whether this is a flaw or simply the nature of a story meant to go on forever, mirroring the endless war it depicts, is something those who love the saga gently debate, and it is, fittingly, one more mystery layered over all the others, a story about a war without end that may itself be a story without end. It is worth lingering on those ancient artifacts, the pieces of Eden, for they are the true engine of the whole saga, the prizes over which the endless war is fought, and the story delights in imagining that they are hidden throughout all of real history, disguised as the legendary objects of 100 myths. The golden apples are the most common, spheres of light that can control minds and cast illusions and unlock forbidden knowledge. And the story suggests that many of history's great deceptions and mass delusions, the moments when whole crowds seem to lose their reason, were really the work of someone wielding one of these. There are also staffs of power, often paired with the apples, and it is hinted that certain great rulers and prophets of the past carried these, mistaking or presenting their alien power as the authority of heaven. There are swords among the artifacts too, blades that channel devastating energy, and the story loves to suggest that the famous magical swords of legend, the blades pulled from stones and carried by chosen kings and saintly warriors, were in truth these ancient weapons, their power remembered as enchantment. There is a healing shroud, a cloth that can mend terrible wounds and perhaps even restore the dead, which the story connects to certain famous holy relics said to work miracles. And there are stranger artifacts still, a staff that grants its bearer a life stretched far beyond any natural span, jewels and tridents and other shapes, each with its own uncanny power, scattered across the ages, and sought by both orders with equal desperation. The genius of these artifacts, as a storytelling device, is the way they let the saga quietly rewrite the whole of human history, suggesting that behind so many of the miracles and legends and turning points of the past, there lay one of these ancient devices, that the true history of the world is a secret history of these objects passing from hand to hand, granting their wielders godlike power, and always corrupting them in the end. For that is the other truth of the pieces of Eden, that they are never safe to use, that their power seduces and warps whoever holds them, so that even the noblest soul who takes one up is slowly turned by it, which is why the assassins so often seek not to wield these artifacts, but simply to hide them away where no one can be tempted by them. There is an even stranger thread woven through the deep lore, concerning certain rare individuals scattered across the centuries, who are something more than ordinary people, humans born carrying the reincarnated soul and memories of one of the ancient first civilization beings. These figures, appearing again and again in different ages and different lands, are marked by a subtle sign, eyes of two different colors, and they are drawn, often without fully understanding why, to serve the return of the ancient will that sleeps beneath history, driven by memories that are not quite their own, toward a purpose older than themselves. One of them turns up among the pirates of the Caribbean, another in other ages, the same ancient soul surfacing over and over in new bodies across the long span of time. It is one of the more haunting ideas in the whole mythology, this notion of an ancient consciousness reincarnating down the centuries, appearing and reappearing, patiently working across thousands of years toward a single goal, and it blurs the line between the ancient past and the living present in a way that gives the whole saga a strange, dreamlike depth. For it means that the deep past is never really past at all, that the ancient beings are still among us, reborn in ordinary-seeming people, their long game still unfolding beneath the surface of the world, and that the history we think we know is only the thinnest skin over a far older and far stranger story that has been quietly turning since before our kind first walked the earth. Beyond the grand mythology, there is a whole quiet world of craft and detail in how these stories are built. Small, beloved touches that fans return to again and again. The most famous of all is the leap of faith, the moment when the assassin climbs to the very top of some great tower or cathedral, spreads their arms, and dives headfirst off the edge into empty air, plummeting an impossible distance to land, unharmed, in a cart of hay or a pile of leaves far below. It is physically absurd, of course, a fall that would kill anyone in the real world, and yet it has become perhaps the single most iconic image of the whole saga, this graceful swan dive from the heights, at once a practical way down and a kind of ritual, an act of pure trust, the assassin throwing themselves into the void and being caught by the world. There is the special sight the assassins possess, a heightened, almost mystical perception, often called the eagle sense, which lets them see the world more deeply than ordinary people, picking out friend from foe, sensing danger, following hidden trails, perceiving the important threads in a confusing world as though touched by gold. It is tied in the lore to the special blood the assassins carry, the trace of the first civilization in their veins, and it is echoed everywhere in the saga's love of eagles and birds of prey, from the names of its heroes to the great birds that soar overhead. In the later chapters, this even took the lovely form of a companion eagle, a real bird that flies at the hero's side and scouts the land from above, the assassin's eyes in the sky, a beautiful expression of the eagle spirit that runs through the whole story. There is the deep principle of hiding in plain sight, which shapes so much of how the assassins move through the world, for they do not skulk in shadows so much as vanish into crowds, slipping into a group of robed scholars or a bench of resting citizens and becoming, in an instant, just another anonymous figure, invisible not through magic, but through ordinariness. This idea of social invisibility, of disappearing by blending in rather than by hiding, was one of the freshest things the saga brought to its kind of story, and it flows directly from the second tenet of the creed, the whole philosophy of the order expressed in the simple act of sitting down among strangers and becoming no one in particular. There is a great tenderness in the way the names of the heroes are chosen, for so many of them carry hidden meanings that quietly echo the themes of the whole saga. The first hero's name speaks of birds and flight, and of being the child of no one. Others carry names that mean the listener, or the one who hears, or that nod to eagles and hawks and hidden things, so that the very naming of the characters becomes a small game of meaning for those who look closely. It is the kind of loving detail that rewards attention, a whole layer of quiet significance folded into the words themselves, the makers of the story leaving small gifts for anyone who cares to look them up. And there is the clever and elegant way the whole framework of inherited memory solves problems that other stories struggle with, turning the artificial conventions of the form into pieces of the story itself. The way a character cannot truly die, but only lose the thread of the memory. The way the edges of the world sometimes dissolve into abstraction at the boundaries of what an ancestor could remember. The way the machine can pause and rewind and replay a life. All of these are woven into the fiction, explained as features of the memory machine rather than hidden away, so that the very seams of the storytelling become part of the story's strange and dreamlike texture, a tale always aware that it is a memory being relived rather than a life being lived. One of the deepest pleasures of the whole saga is the way it braids its fiction through real history, placing its invented heroes shoulder to shoulder with the actual figures of the past, so that across the different chapters you meet a great parade of real men and women who genuinely lived. You walk beside the great inventor of the Renaissance and the ruthless popes of that age, beside the founders and generals of a revolution in the New World, beside the famous pirates of the Caribbean, beside the last queen of ancient Egypt and the general who loved her, beside the philosophers of ancient Greece, beside the kings and raiders of the Northern Age, beside the writers and scientists and monarchs of the industrial city. The story delights in imagining that these real people were quietly entangled in the secret war, that history's great figures were secretly assassins or secretly enemies or simply caught, unknowing, in the middle. This weaving of fiction into fact is done with genuine care and genuine research, for the makers of the saga have always taken real history seriously, studying the periods they recreate with the help of historians, rebuilding lost cities and vanished landmarks with painstaking accuracy, dressing their invented drama in a world of real and carefully reconstructed detail. The result is that even as you chase ancient artifacts and ghostly recordings, you are walking through a version of the past assembled with real love and real scholarship. The streets and buildings and clothes and customs drawn as faithfully as a work of fiction can manage, so that the fantasy floats always upon a foundation of honest history. This care for the real past eventually blossomed into something genuinely educational, for the later chapters offered a special way to experience their worlds stripped of all the fighting and the fiction, a guided journey through the recreated ancient cities as a kind of living museum, letting anyone simply wander through ancient Egypt or classical Greece or the Viking Age and learn about the real history, the daily lives, the buildings and beliefs of the people who lived there. These guided tours through the past have even found their way into some schools and classrooms, a remarkable thing for a series that began as an action game. The careful historical worlds turned into a tool for teaching, the fantasy set aside to let the real past speak. There is a quiet and thoughtful gesture at the very start of these stories too, a message that appears before each adventure begins, noting that the work is a piece of fiction inspired by history, and that it was made by a team of many different backgrounds and many different faiths and beliefs. It is a small thing, easy to skip past, but it carries a real intention, an acknowledgement that these stories move through sensitive ground, through real religions and real cultures and real historical wounds, and a quiet promise that they are made with respect by people of many traditions working together, trying to tell a story that belongs to all of human history rather than to any single part of it. And this points to something genuinely admirable in the whole spirit of the saga, its deep and abiding curiosity about the human past, its wish not merely to use history as a backdrop, but to honor it, to send millions of people wandering through carefully rebuilt ancient worlds, to spark in them some real interest in the times and places and peoples of long ago. For all its fantastical elements, its ancient astronauts and mind-controlling artifacts and reincarnated gods, the saga is at heart a great love letter to history itself, to the endless richness of the human story. And there is something lovely in the thought of all the people who first grew curious about ancient Egypt, or Renaissance Italy, or the Viking Age, because they had wandered through them, quietly, in one of these dreams of the past. The real-world story of how this saga grew is its own quiet epic, for from that first game, born out of a cancelled prince, it swelled into one of the largest and most successful series of its kind ever made, selling astonishing numbers across the world and spawning chapter after chapter, year after year, until the hooded assassin became one of the most recognizable figures in the whole medium. For a long stretch, a new adventure arrived almost every single year, an extraordinary pace, each one a whole new city and a whole new age rebuilt from scratch, and this relentless yearly rhythm made the saga a fixture of its era, even as some began to wonder whether so much, so fast, might wear thin. The makers eventually sensed that too, and in one of the boldest decisions in the saga's history, they paused, stepped back, and reinvented the whole thing, transforming it from a game of pure stealth and precise assassination into something far larger and more sprawling, a vast open adventure of exploration and growth and choice, with enormous worlds to wander and long journeys of character to undertake. This great reinvention, beginning with the journey into ancient Egypt, divided those who loved the saga, some mourning the tighter, more focused stealth of the early chapters, and others delighting in the enormous, breathing historical worlds the new form made possible. And the debate between the two visions of what the saga should be continues gently to this day. The scale of these later worlds became genuinely staggering, whole countries recreated in loving detail, vast enough that simply crossing them could take a real and considerable time, filled with thousands of small handcrafted details, so that the makers were, in effect, rebuilding entire ancient civilizations for people to live inside. It is a remarkable thing to consider, the sheer human labor folded into these worlds, the years of work by hundreds and hundreds of artists and writers and historians and programmers, all poured into constructing these enormous, walkable dreams of the past, some of the largest and most detailed recreations of history ever attempted in any medium. The saga spread far beyond the games themselves too, into a whole constellation of other tellings, a shelf of novels expanding the stories of the heroes, comics exploring new corners of the war, short films and animated pieces, and a large feature film that brought the story of the machine and the ancient artifacts to the cinema screen with a well-known cast. Not all of these were equally beloved, and the film in particular met a mixed reception, but together they show how the world outgrew its original form, becoming a sprawling mythology told across every kind of media, the kind of vast shared universe that only the most successful of stories ever managed to become. And through all of this growth and change and reinvention, the essential heart of the thing remained the same: the hood and the hidden blade, the leap of faith, the endless war between freedom and control, the strange and beautiful idea of reliving the memories of the dead, the whole rich mythology of ancient beings and hidden artifacts and secret history. However much the form changed, however large the worlds grew, that core remained, recognizable across every chapter and every age, and it is that unchanging heart, as much as any single hero or any single city, that has kept the saga beloved across so many years, a story about the deep human longing to be free, told over and over, in age after age after age. There are dozens of smaller wonders scattered through the saga, little facts that reward the curious, and it is pleasant to drift through a few of them as the night deepens. There is the music, first of all, for the beloved second hero's story carried a piece of music so haunting and so lovely, a slow and melancholy theme built around a simple, aching melody, that it grew far beyond the game itself to become the unofficial anthem of the whole saga, played by orchestras around the world, instantly recognizable to millions. A piece of music that can call up the entire mood of the series in a few gentle notes. It is one of those rare pieces of game music that has slipped free of its origin to become simply a beautiful thing in its own right. A melody that people who have never touched the game still find themselves moved by. There is the matter of the first hero's name, which is drawn from a real star, one of the brightest in the night sky, a star whose name comes from an old phrase meaning the flying one, and which sits, fittingly, within a constellation shaped like an eagle. So the very first assassin is named for a bright star in the eagle's wing, a lovely secret hidden in plain sight, tying the hero to the heavens and to the eagle spirit that runs through the whole saga, a piece of poetry folded quietly into a name that most people never pause to unravel. There is the real history that survives to this day, for the great mountain fortresses of the ancient order were not invented but real, and some of them still stand, weathered ruins clinging to their peaks, that a traveller can visit even now, walking the same stones where the true medieval assassins once lived and schemed and watched the roads below. There is something wonderful in that, in the way the saga's fantasy rests on real places you could stand in, real fortresses whose broken walls still remember the order that inspired the whole story, the legend and the reality touching across the centuries. There is a small and charming secret about the famous cry of the eagle that echoes across the saga, the piercing scream that sounds whenever the hero climbs to a high point and gazes out over the land. For that stirring cry is not, in truth, the voice of an eagle at all. Real eagles make a rather thin and unimpressive sound, and so, as filmmakers and storytellers have long quietly done, the saga borrows the far more majestic scream of a different bird of prey, a hawk, and lends it to its eagles, so that the great soaring cry we all associate with the noble eagle is really a beautiful little deception, a borrowed voice that sounds the way we feel an eagle ought to sound. There is the clever idea, introduced partway through the saga, of climbing to the highest points of a city to survey and reveal the land spread out below, synchronizing the memory by taking in the view from on high, an idea so elegant and satisfying that it spread far beyond this saga to become one of the most widely imitated conventions in the whole medium, the tall tower you climb to unveil the map around it. So many later stories borrowed this simple, graceful notion that it became almost a cliché, and yet it began here, with an assassin standing atop a cathedral, drinking in the view, and then diving off into the hay below. There is the beloved experiment in which the saga turned its idea of hiding in a crowd into a game between real people, letting players stalk one another through crowded streets, each disguised as an ordinary citizen among a sea of identical figures, hunting and being hunted, the tension lying in the terrible difficulty of telling the one real threat from all the innocent bystanders. It was a genuinely fresh and nerve-wracking idea, a game of patience and nerve and disguise rather than raw speed, and it captured the deep spirit of the assassins, the art of the unseen killer moving through the crowd, better than almost any pitched battle ever could. There is the graceful way the heroes move through their cities, running up walls and vaulting over rooftops and flowing across the tops of the world, an art of movement drawn from the real practice of free running, the modern discipline of moving fluidly through an urban landscape, treating walls and railings and gaps not as obstacles but as invitations. The makers studied real practitioners of this art to give their assassins that liquid, weightless quality of motion, and it became one of the defining sensations of the whole saga. That feeling of never being stopped by anything, of flowing up and over and across the city as though the buildings themselves were a path laid out for you, the whole world become a thing to be climbed. There is the true and rather somber history of what became of the real order that inspired it all, for the actual mountain assassins of the medieval world did not last forever. their power broken at last when a great wave of conquerors swept out of the east and stormed their fortresses, taking even the mighty castle that had stood as their heart, and what remained of the order was finished off by other powers in the years that followed. The real secret order that so gripped the imaginations of travelers and storytellers came, in the end, to its own quiet end among its broken mountain strongholds, a small and once feared power extinguished by the tides of history, leaving behind only legends, and centuries later, this whole vast saga built upon its memory. There is the small, satisfying detail of the sound the hidden blade makes, that quiet metallic whisper as it springs out from beneath the sleeve, a sound the makers crafted with care because it had to feel deadly and final and yet quiet enough to belong to a weapon of stealth, and it became one of the small sensory signatures of the whole saga, that soft mechanical snick that means an assassin is near. So beloved is the weapon that fans across the world have built their own working replicas of it, wearable blades that extend from the forearm at a flick of the wrist, one of the most recreated props in the whole medium, a testament to how deeply that single elegant weapon captured people's imaginations. There is the way the saga names its chapters and its heroes, with such deliberate meaning, and the quiet games it plays with words and symbols, the hidden messages tucked into loading screens and background details, the puzzles left for the sharpest eyes to solve, the sense throughout that the story is layered, that there is always another meaning beneath the surface if you care to look for it. This delight in hidden depth, in secrets within secrets, is perfectly suited to a saga about a secret order and a hidden history, and it has given rise to a whole devoted community of people who pore over every detail, hunting for the connections and the meanings and the buried clues, playing detective across the entire sprawling mythology. And there is, running through all of it, the simple, enduring power of the image at the center, the hooded figure on the rooftop, cloaked and silent, looking out over a great city at dusk, poised between the world of ordinary people below and the empty sky above. It is one of the most striking and beloved images in the whole medium, this lone hooded watcher, at once a killer and a guardian, a shadow and a protector, and it captures something deep and romantic about the whole idea of the assassin, the solitary figure who moves unseen through history, shaping the world from the shadows and asking nothing in return, remembered by no one, working always in the dark for a freedom that others will never know they were given. Beneath all the artifacts and the ancient beings and the endless action, the saga has always carried a genuine philosophy, a set of real ideas that it turns over again and again, and part of why it has held so many people for so long is that it takes these ideas seriously. At its center is that great unresolved question of freedom against control, of whether human beings are best left free to choose even when they choose badly, or best guided and protected even at the cost of their liberty. And the saga's refusal to simply answer this, its insistence on showing the good and the cost of both, gives it a thoughtfulness rare in stories of its kind. It trusts its audience to sit with the difficulty, to feel the pull of both sides, to leave the great argument open. And there is the strange, humbling wisdom of that central maxim, the idea that nothing is true and everything is permitted, which the saga treats not as a license for cruelty, but as a hard truth about the human condition, the recognition that the certainties we lean on are our own creations, that no rule is written into the stars, and that this terrible freedom comes with the terrible weight of complete responsibility for what we choose to do. It is a genuinely challenging idea to build a popular adventure around, and the fact that the saga returns to it so seriously wrestling with what it means to be truly free in a world without given answers, is part of what lifts it above mere spectacle. There is a quiet comfort, too, in the very premise of the whole thing, in the idea of ancestral memory, of the notion that the lives of those who came before us are not entirely lost, but live on somehow within us, written into our very blood, waiting to be remembered. It is a fantasy, of course, a piece of invented science, and yet it touches something real and deep, the longing to feel connected to the past, to the long chain of people whose lives made ours possible, to feel that we are not alone and cut off in the present moment, but part of something vast and continuous, a story reaching back across all the generations. There is a real tenderness in that idea, beneath all the action, a wish to belong to history, to feel the dead still with us. And there is the beauty of the image the whole saga leaves us with, the assassin as a kind of secret guardian of human freedom, working unseen across all the ages, asking for no thanks and no glory, protecting a liberty that most people will never know was ever in danger. It is a romantic and slightly melancholy vision, this idea of unremembered heroes laboring in the shadows of history so that ordinary people might live free. And it gives the saga, for all its violence, a genuinely gentle and hopeful heart, a faith in the quiet, unrewarded work of protecting others, a belief that some people, in every age, will always stand up in the dark for the freedom of those who will never know their names. Perhaps that is the deepest reason the saga has lasted, that beneath the towers and the blades, it is really about the things that matter most, about freedom and responsibility and the long chain of human lives, about the courage to act and the wisdom to doubt, about belonging to something larger than yourself and to a history longer than your own life. It dresses these deep and gentle themes in the clothes of a grand adventure and sends us leaping across the rooftops of the past, but it never forgets them, and it is that quiet seriousness, that real heart beneath the spectacle, that has kept so many people returning to it, age after age, city after city, life after remembered life. There is one corner of the saga that is perhaps the most soothing of all, and it is the open sea. For when the story sailed into the golden age of piracy, it gave the hero a ship of his own and let him roam the wide blue waters of the Caribbean. And the experience of sailing became one of the most beloved things the whole saga ever offered. To stand at the wheel of your own ship, sails full of wind, cutting across a sparkling sea toward a distant island, the water stretching away in every direction, was a feeling of freedom and peace unlike anything in the more crowded city chapters, and many people remember it as the part of the whole saga they loved best, the simple joy of being out on the water with nowhere in particular to be. And there was a small and unexpected wonder that came with the sailing, for as the ship crossed the long empty stretches of ocean between islands, the crew would begin to sing, lifting their voices together in the old work songs of sailors, the rhythmic chanting songs once used to keep time as men hauled ropes and turned capstans. These sea songs, gathered and recorded with real care, drawn from the genuine folk traditions of the Age of Sail, became one of the most cherished parts of the whole experience, so beloved that people sought them out to listen to on their own, and they spread far beyond the saga into a wider revival of interest in these old ocean melodies. There is something deeply peaceful in the memory of them, the crew's voices rising and falling across the water under a wide sky, and it is a lovely thing to drift towards sleep upon. The collecting of these songs became a small quest in itself, for scattered across the seas were the fragments of these melodies, drifting on scraps of paper to be chased down and gathered up, each one adding another song to the crew's repertoire, another voice to the choir that would carry the hero across the water. It is a gentle and charming idea, a pirate sailing the seas not only for gold and glory, but quietly gathering songs, building up a whole songbook of the old ocean ballads, so that his ship became a floating chorus, and the long voyages between adventures filled with music drawn up out of the real history of the sea. This love of the sea carried through into other chapters too, into the cold northern waters where longships crossed the grey seas, and into other corners of the saga. But it was in that golden age of piracy that the water truly came alive, with storms to weather, and great waves to ride, and other ships to meet on the open ocean. And through it all ran that same feeling of peace beneath the adventure, the sense of the small ship alone on the vast sea, the crew singing, the wind steady, the horizon endless, a feeling that has stayed with people long after they set the story down. One of the quiet gifts the saga gave, the memory of sailing a bright sea under a wide sky with a song rising from the deck. There is nothing quite like it in the rest of the saga, that openness, that room to breathe, and it points to something the whole story does at its best, which is to leave space amid all the intrigue and the killing for simple beauty, for a sunrise over the water, or a view from a high tower, or a quiet ride through the countryside, moments of stillness folded into the adventure. And it is those quiet moments, more than any battle, that people tend to remember and return to, the small, still beauties scattered through the great sprawling worlds, the places where the saga simply let you stop and look and breathe and be somewhere beautiful for a while. There is a lovely thread in the saga about the building of the Brotherhood itself, about how a lone assassin becomes the heart of a whole order, and it found its finest expression in the story of the beloved second hero, who in his middle years took it upon himself to rebuild the shattered Brotherhood in a great city that had fallen under the enemy's control. He would find young men and women wronged by the powerful, angry and grieving and looking for a purpose, and he would take them in and train them in the ways of the Order, and then send them out into the world on missions of their own, so that one assassin slowly became many, a single blade becoming a whole hidden network spreading through the city. There was real warmth in this, in the way the lone hero became a mentor and a leader, gathering the lost and the wronged and giving them a family and a cause, and in the way he could call upon his trained apprentices in a moment of need, summoning them from the crowd to strike alongside him and then vanish again. It gave a sense of the Brotherhood as something living and growing, not just one exceptional individual, but a community, a tradition passed from teacher to student, and it echoed the deepest idea of the whole saga, the passing of the creed down the long chain of the generations, each assassin training the next, the Order renewing itself endlessly across time. The Order marked itself with a symbol, an insignia that appears throughout the whole saga, a stylized shape a little like a curved and pointed letter, a little like the head of an eagle, a little like an old ceremonial blade, and this emblem became one of the most recognizable symbols in the whole medium, stamped on walls and banners and the hilts of hidden blades, a secret sign that assassins across the ages would know. There is a fittingness in its resemblance to an eagle, given how deeply the eagle runs through everything, the eagle sight and the eagle names and the great birds wheeling overhead, so that the very badge of the Order carries the spirit of the bird of prey that has always been its truest emblem. And there is the hood itself, the deep cowl that shadows the assassin's face, which has become perhaps the single most iconic piece of the whole saga's look, drawn in part from the robes of medieval scholars and monks, and in part from the imagery of falconry, the pointed beak-like peak of the hood, echoing the head of a hooded hawk. It is a brilliant piece of design, at once historical and timeless, practical and mysterious, and it unites all the many heroes across all the many ages, for whatever else changes, whatever city or century they belong to, the assassins are known always by that hood, that shadowed face, that shape of the solitary figure cloaked against the world. These small traditions and symbols, the hood and the insignia and the hidden blade and the creed, are what bind the whole sprawling saga together, the threads of continuity that run through every different hero and every different age, so that no matter how far the story wanders, into ancient Egypt or Renaissance Italy or the age of pirates, you always know at once that you are among the assassins. It is a remarkable feat of world building, this handful of enduring symbols carried across thousands of years of story, and it is part of why the saga feels so much like a single great tapestry, rather than a scattered collection of separate tales, one long unbroken tradition, one order, one creed, one hood, passed down across all of human history. The assassins have their words as well as their symbols, phrases they speak to one another and to themselves that carry the whole spirit of the order, and chief among them is a quiet, beautiful line about their work, the idea that they labor in the dark to serve the light. It is a lovely and melancholy way to describe what they are, workers in shadow whose whole purpose is the light they will never stand in, guardians who must remain hidden, protectors who can never be thanked. And the phrase captures the deep and gentle sorrow at the heart of the whole order, the willingness to do unseen and unrewarded work so that others may live in a brightness they themselves are denied. There is a striking and tender ritual woven into the killings themselves, one of the most memorable things the saga ever did, for whenever an assassin strikes down one of their great targets, the story slows and softens into a strange, quiet space, a place outside of time, where the dying enemy and the assassin who killed them speak, gently, one last time. In these hushed final conversations, the targets are allowed their humanity, allowed to explain themselves, to reveal that they too believed they were serving something good, to confess their fears and their regrets and their reasons, so that they die not as mere villains but as people, complicated and often sympathetic, and the assassin listens, and the audience is left to sit with the weight of the life just taken. And at the close of these quiet death scenes, the assassin performs a small act of grace, closing the dead enemy's eyes with a gentle hand and speaking a soft blessing over them, a wish that they rest in peace, spoken often in the old church language of the West. It is a remarkable thing, this tenderness toward the very people the assassin has just killed, this refusal to let even an enemy die without dignity. And it says a great deal about the soul of the order, that its killers are taught to honor the humanity of those they slay, to feel the weight of every life they take, to kill when they must, with sorrow rather than hatred. These moments give the whole saga a moral seriousness that lifts it far above simple action, for they insist, again and again, that killing is a grave and terrible thing, that even a justified death is a tragedy, that the enemy is a human being with their own story and their own reasons. It would have been easy to make the targets simple monsters whose deaths we could cheer, but the saga chose the harder and more honest path, letting them be people, letting their deaths cost something, letting the assassin, and through the assassin the audience, feel the full weight of the blade. And there is a strange comfort even in that seriousness, in a story that takes death so seriously, that mourns even its villains, that never lets killing become weightless or easy. The words and the rituals together, the mantra about the dark and the light, the quiet confessions of the dying, the gentle blessing over the dead, build up a picture of the assassins as something far richer than mere killers, as a kind of sorrowful priesthood of freedom, bound by discipline and by a deep respect for the very lives they are sometimes forced to take. It is one of the things that has kept people so devoted to the saga, this sense that beneath the action there is a genuine moral weight, a real seriousness about violence and freedom and the terrible costs of both, carried in a handful of quiet words and gentle gestures repeated across all the long centuries of the story. Among the true stars of the whole saga, perhaps the greatest of all, are the cities themselves, for the makers have rebuilt some of the most beautiful and storied places in all of human history, and simply to wander through them is one of the deepest pleasures the story offers. There is the ancient holy city of the Crusades, its pale stone streets and its great domes shimmering in the desert heat. There is the jewel of the Renaissance on its river, all red-tiled roofs and soaring cathedral domes. There is the city of canals, its palaces rising straight out of the water, its bridges and its narrow lanes. There is the eternal city with its crumbling ancient ruins and its grand new churches, and the great city on the strait between two continents, where the domes and minarets of the east meet the towers of the west. There is the sprawling Caribbean of the Pirate Age, not one city but a whole scattered world of islands and harbours and hidden coves, sun-drenched and salt-washed. And there is the fevered capital of the French Revolution, its grand boulevards and its shadowed alleys, its cathedral and its palaces, caught in the moment of its great upheaval. There is the vast foggy metropolis of the industrial age, its river and its bridges and its endless rooftops stretching away into the smoke, and reaching back into the deep past there is ancient Egypt with its temples and its deserts and its great river, and classical Greece with its white cities and its blue seas and its temples on the hills, and the green misty kingdoms of the Northern Age with their forests and their fortresses. To move through these places is to travel not only across the world but across time, to see how people lived and built and worshipped in a dozen different ages, to walk the streets of cities that in some cases no longer exist in the forms shown, rebuilt from paintings and maps and the careful work of historians, so that the saga becomes a kind of time machine, a way to stand in the middle of the ancient and the vanished past and simply look around. And the makers filled these cities with life, with crowds and markets and music and the small business of ordinary days, so that they feel not like empty stage sets but like living places, breathing and busy, full of the countless small human stories going on all around the hero. There is a particular magic in the high places of these cities, in climbing to the top of some great tower or dome or cliff and looking out over the whole sprawl of it, the rooftops and the streets and the distant hills, the whole beautiful world laid out below in the golden light of evening. These moments of high stillness, poised above a great city at dusk with the whole of it spread out beneath you, are among the most beloved in the entire saga, a reward for the climb, a moment of pure peace and beauty before the dive back down into the world, and they are lovely things to picture as sleep draws near, the hero high above the sleeping city, the wind soft, the light gold, the whole world quiet and far below. And it is these cities, more than the artifacts or the conspiracies, or even the heroes, that people so often remember most fondly, the feeling of having lived, for a while, in Renaissance Florence, or ancient Alexandria, or the Golden Caribbean, the streets and the light and the sounds of places rebuilt with such love that they lodge in the memory almost like places truly visited. It is a remarkable gift, this, to let millions of people wander through the beautiful lost cities of the past, and it may be the truest achievement of the whole saga, the rebuilding of the human past into places you can walk through and remember and return to, a whole world of vanished beauty made walkable again, waiting quietly to be wandered through once more. There is a melancholy that runs quietly beneath the whole saga, a recurring sorrow that gives even its grandest adventures a gentle sadness, and it is the deep loneliness of the assassin's life, the terrible cost of the path these heroes walk. For again and again, across all the different ages and all the different heroes, the story tells the same quiet truth, that to be an assassin is to lose the people you love, to watch your family taken, your friends fall, your loved ones die in the endless war, so that nearly every one of these heroes carries a burden of grief, a trail of the dead behind them, a life shaped by loss. The very first hero outlives his wife and his sons. The beloved second begins his tale with the murder of his father and brothers. The family across the generations is torn apart by the war between father and son, and so it goes, hero after hero, grief after grief. It is one of the truest and most human things about the saga, this honest reckoning with the cost of the life it depicts, the refusal to pretend that a life of secret war and constant danger could be anything other than lonely and sorrowful, that a person who gives themselves entirely to a cause must sacrifice, along the way, so much of the ordinary happiness that other people are allowed. The assassins protect the freedom and the happiness of others precisely by giving up their own, standing guard in the cold and the dark, so that others may sleep warm and safe, and there is a real and gentle sadness in that, in these lonely guardians who can never quite have the peaceful lives they fight to protect. And yet the saga does not leave its heroes only in sorrow, for it grants them too moments of real warmth and real belonging, the friendships and the loves and the found families that grow up along the way, the brotherhood itself as a kind of home for the lost, so that even the loneliest of these figures is never entirely alone. The beloved second hero has his friendships and his long marriage and his children in the end. Others find companions and causes and communities that give their hard lives meaning. And always there is the order itself, the great family stretching across the centuries, so that each assassin, however solitary, belongs to something vast and enduring, a tradition that will remember them and carry on after they are gone. There is a deep comfort in that balance, in a story that is honest about the sorrow of its heroes' lives, and yet insists that those lives are not without warmth, not without love, not without meaning, that even a life of secret struggle and terrible loss can hold real joy and real belonging. It refuses both easy triumph and easy despair, holding instead to something truer and gentler, the sense that life is hard and full of loss and worth living anyway, that we labor in the dark and lose much along the way, and yet find, in one another and in our causes, enough light to make it all worthwhile. And that, perhaps, is the deepest and most comforting wisdom the whole saga has to offer, carried quietly beneath all the towers and the blades. It is a fine thing to rest upon as sleep draws near, this gentle acceptance of both the sorrow and the warmth of a long life, this refusal to look away from loss, and this insistence, all the same, on love and belonging and meaning. The assassins carry their grief and carry on, and they find, in the carrying on, in the brotherhood and the cause and the quiet moments of beauty along the way, enough to sustain them, and there are few kinder or more human ideas to hold as you drift towards sleep than that one, the quiet, stubborn faith that a life may be full of loss and full of meaning both at once, and be, in the end, a life well lived. We have wandered a long way tonight, across thousands of years and dozens of cities, through the whole vast dream of the hidden brotherhood, and as the night draws in around us, it is worth resting for a quiet moment on why all of this should be such a soothing thing to drift towards sleep upon. Part of it, surely, is the sheer scale of it, the way the saga carries us so gently across the whole span of human history, from the deserts of the ancient world to the canals of the Renaissance, to the fog of the industrial age, so that lying here we may wander through all of time itself, drifting from one beautiful rebuilt world to the next, asked to do nothing but look and marvel and let it carry us along. And part of it is the deep and gentle idea at the base of it all, the notion of memory sleeping in the blood, of the past living on quietly within us, of all the countless lives that came before ours, not truly lost but somehow still with us, still part of us, waiting in the dark. There is something restful in that thought, something that eases the loneliness of the present moment, the sense of belonging to a great long chain of people stretching back across all the ages, and it is a kind and comforting thing to hold as you sink towards sleep, the feeling of being held, however faintly, by the whole long story of everyone who ever lived. And part of it, perhaps, is the image of the assassin at rest, for we have seen that even these tireless heroes, these hooded figures who give their whole lives to the endless secret war, are allowed at last, some of them, to set down the blade, to retire to a quiet farm in the sun, to grow old in peace with the people they love, their long struggle finally behind them. And there is a promise in that, a gentle reassurance that even the hardest labor may find its rest at the end, that even the most watchful guardian is allowed, someday, to close their eyes, and it is a fine and comforting thing to carry with you now, at the end of your own long day, as you too set down everything you have been carrying, and rest. So let all of it settle over you now, softly, the whole great sweep of it, and let it grow quiet and begin to fade. Let it drift over you one last time, the fortress in the mountains and the moonlit rooftops of the old cities, the golden apple glowing in the dark, the eagle turning high against the sky, the hooded figure poised at the very top of a great tower and then diving, arms spread, gracefully down into the soft hay far below. Let the images grow dim and gentle and soft at their edges, no longer quite pictures now, but only a warm grey drift, kind and formless and slow, dissolving gently into the quiet, into the warmth, into the soft and steady rhythm of your own easy breathing. None of it needs anything from you now, not one of all those cities, not one of all those heroes, not a single one of all the secrets and the artifacts and the long unfinished war. They can all wait quietly in the dark, the way they have waited so patiently across all the centuries, and you may let them go, gently, one after another, the fortress and the apple and the eagle and the ship and the hood, all of them drifting away now, all of them only light and story and make-believe, all of them letting you go. You do not need to hold on to any of it. You do not need to remember a single name. You need only rest. There is nothing to climb tonight, no tower to scale and no leap to take, no target waiting in the crowd and no blade to draw from the dark. You have wandered a long way already into the story of the hidden brotherhood, into the cancelled prince and the old novel and the fortress in the mountains, and there is nothing more you need to carry now, and nothing at all you must stay awake to hear. Let it all drift over you softly now. The moonlight on the old rooftops, the white hood and the long shadow, the great city spread out far below and the wind moving over it. Let the images grow dim and gentle and soft at their edges, the way the world does in the last moments before sleep, until they are no longer quite pictures at all, but only a warm grey drift, kind and formless and slow. None of it is real, and none of it can touch you. The hooded figures can keep their long, quiet watch over their cities without any help from you tonight, and all their secrets can wait, patiently, in the dark, where they have waited so long already, and you may set the whole of it gently down, and rest. There is nothing to climb here, and nothing to fear, and nothing to do but let your body grow heavy, and your thoughts grow soft, and the last of the day drains slowly away. You do not have to be watchful tonight, and you do not have to be strong, and you do not have to carry anything at all, not a single blade, not a single secret, not a single one of all the day's small burdens. The long day is over now, every last piece of it, and you carried it well, and there is nothing left of it to solve or to finish, only the soft dark closing gently around you, like a hood drawn softly over your eyes, warm and kind and yours. Let each slow breath carry you a little further down, past the last of the day's small worries, down into the quiet, down into the warmth, down toward the deep and easy rest that is waiting for you now. Let the far cities grow quiet, their lights dimming one by one, their crowds thinning, their great towers fading into the dusk. Let the eagle settle onto its high perch and fold its wings. Let the ship come home to harbour and the sails come down. Let the last hooded figure slip down from the rooftops and vanish gently into the sleeping city until there is nothing left but the soft grey quiet, and you, here, warm and safe beneath the blankets, breathing slow, sinking down, letting go. There is nowhere you need to be, and nothing you need to remember, and no tower in all the world that you must climb tonight. Rest now. You have earned this quiet too. Let the far cities and their old rooftops fade into the ordinary, harmless dark of your own room, soft and kind, and yours to sleep in, and there is nothing at all you need to do until morning, but lie still in the warmth and breathe, and drift, and rest. The whole long story will keep, safe and complete, until you wake, and there is no hurry now, and nowhere else to be, only here, only this, only the soft dark and your own slow breathing, carrying you gently down. Sleep well, and let the gentle dark carry you softly down toward the light of morning. Good night.